The Echo Signal. Chapter 1, The Silence in the Snow. Alaska, January 2038. Coordinates, 65.2221 degrees north, 146.8696 degrees west. The cold made sounds disappear. Not just mute them, erase them like a magnetic wipe on old tape. It was the kind of cold that sank into bones, into thought. Mara Voss zipped up her jacket as tightly as it would go and adjusted her goggles. The abandoned Cold War listening station stood ahead of her in the white dusk, half buried in snow like a mouth frozen mid-scream. She'd been here before. Years ago, back when this place was still sealed behind 3 levels of clearance and hidden behind a mountain of bureaucracy. Now it was just dead tech, forgotten by the people who once feared it. Voss, came the voice through her earpiece. Radiation sensors show normal. Doors unlocked. Of course it was. She pushed open the warped steel and stepped into the darkness. The interior smelled of mildew and battery acid. Flickering emergency LEDs, likely solar-charged by whatever backup system still clung to life, painted the corridors in faint red pulses. It felt more like a mausoleum than a research site. She made her way to the central terminal room, the old comms hub where giant analog machinery once parsed Soviet radio chatter. The equipment had been stripped long ago, leaving only rusted panels and a cracked floor. But someone, recently, had placed a portable workstation in the center, glowing faintly in the dark. She recognized the interface. Orbital Aeon Labs. Of course. Mara powered it up fully. The login was preloaded. Inside was one file. Just one. Signal underscore 2037 resolution D3.wave. She hesitated. Then she hit play. Nothing. Just silence. She listened again. Adjusted volume. Pulled off her gloves, tapped settings. Still nothing. But then, something shifted. It wasn't sound. It was a feeling, a presence, like something just behind her had leaned in, too close, breathing softly but never touching. She turned around. No one. But her ears were ringing now. Not from volume. From absence. She pressed her hand to the side of her head. Something was there. Not a tone. Not static. A pattern. Pulses. Too slow to be code, too precise to be random. Her breath caught in her throat. The cold air inside the room suddenly felt denser. 3 pulses. Pause. Then 5. Then 1. She knew that pattern. It was one of the signal templates she herself had theorized. A language not of symbols but of time. She'd written it off. An academic paper, long buried under peer rejection and silence. She sat down staring at the file. The timestamp read, captured December 28, 2037, 3:17 and 22 seconds Greenwich Mean Time. Location, Aleutian Trench, 6,300 meters below sea level. But that wasn't the most important detail. The most important detail was in the metadata. The signal was logged 6 hours before any equipment had even arrived at the capture site. It had been recorded, before the recording began. She leaned back slowly in the chair. Outside, a sudden gust of wind howled against the structure. And with it came a soft, unmistakable whisper, not over the speakers but in her mind. You're late. Mara Voss did not believe in God. She did not believe in fate or ghosts, or anything that could not be catalogued and quantified. But at that moment, sitting alone in a frozen ruin with an impossible signal playing a pattern from her own discarded theories, she believed in something. And it terrified her. Chapter 2, Threads in the Static. New Delhi, India, January 2, 2038. For 11ist. Samir Patel didn't sleep much anymore. He lay on the thin mattress in his cluttered apartment above a shuttered pharmacy, eyes wide open in the dark, surrounded by the hum of machines. 4 monitors cast a flickering glow across walls papered in printouts, waveform diagrams, spectral maps, digital constellations of noise. His computer made a sharp clicking sound. Then another. Then a long, irregular beep. Thread 423 / incoming packet. 2.3 MB, unlisted node. Samir sat up immediately. The packet didn't come from a public node. Not even a military one. It came from something that didn't officially exist. A ghost server in the DARPA archives, one he'd been quietly probing for weeks. He clicked to open it. It wasn't text. It wasn't a data dump. It was a sound file. A raw.wave labeled only, Nemesis, /sector. His pulse jumped. He played it once. Silence. Then a pulse. Oh. Sub-bass. Barely perceptible. Then a second, a third, a fifth. He froze. It was the same pattern he'd seen on the anonymous forum 3 days ago. A fringe group, more spiritual than scientific, had posted it as a gift from the Mother Eye. Most assumed it was some AI-generated hoax. Samir hadn't. He'd seen structure in it, geometry, intention. He opened his decryption toolset and began aligning the waveform with his own version of the Fibonacci rhythm parser. Nothing made sense. The signal wasn't shaped for human perception, but it responded to mental focus like it knew it was being watched. Samir stared too long, and then something moved. Not on the screen. In the room. Just beyond the computer's glow. A shape, human-sized but not quite human-shaped, crossed from shadow to deeper shadow. He stood up, heart hammering. Turned on the overhead light. Nothing. Just his clutter. Books, wires, mugs, soldering iron. He returned to the waveform. Rewound. Played again. Then an overlay flickered on the screen, uncommanded. A message. If you hear it, you're already in it. Omega-A.L. Protocol Node 7B. Samir blinked. He hadn't typed anything. No process had launched. The terminal hadn't connected to any external command chain. He didn't even know what Omega-A.L was. He ran a WHOS trace. Nothing. He tried to ping the IP. No response. He leaned closer. In the center of the screen, the waveform had changed. It was morphing. Shifting not over time, but in place like a looped signal rewriting itself in the moment. It was beginning to resemble something else entirely. Not a map. Not a song. A neural lattice. A human brain. His breath caught. The activation zones were lighting up in areas associated with language, pattern recognition, empathy, and something deeper. Something that didn't have a label. A memory came back. One he hadn't thought of in 20 years. The power outage. The orange lights. His mother standing by the window, repeating numbers in a voice that wasn't hers. He had told himself that was a dream. A child's fever memory. But the waveform matched. Exactly. A low ping sounded again. Another message. They're waking up. You should too. Samir slammed the laptop shut. He sat in silence. The kind of silence that wasn't quiet but pregnant, as if waiting for something to finish arriving. He looked out the window. The night sky over Delhi was smog-heavy, dim. But in the northern distance just above the horizon he saw it. A light. Faint. Pulsing. 3 times. Pause. 5. 1. He didn't sleep that night. Chapter 3, Ghosts in the Machine. Alaska, January 4, 2038. 12:15 Alaska Standard Time. Mara didn't expect the courier to arrive so soon. She was sitting in the cramped mess hall of the old listening station, eating cold coffee in a protein bar, staring at the flickering console. Outside, the Arctic wind rattled the metal walls, shaking loose decades of frozen silence. The courier came in with no announcement, a tall man in a black parka who looked more like a ghost than a guest. His eyes were sharp, the kind of sharp that didn't miss a thing. Dr. Voss? His voice was flat, official. She nodded. I'm Colonel Nathaniel Ward. I represent the Department of National Security. The words landed like a frozen hammer. Mara's mind raced, but she kept her face steady. I'm aware of your contract with Orbital Aeon Labs, he continued, pulling a slim tablet from his pocket. We've been monitoring the signal. You're closer than anyone else. She gestured toward the console. I'm trying to understand what it is. It's not just a signal. It's something else. Ward's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed. Something else was exactly what they feared. The military had known about the signal's existence for years, quietly suppressing leaks and discrediting witnesses. You don't know what you're dealing with, Doctor. This isn't just an unidentified signal. It's a weaponized waveform. Something that can enter human consciousness. Mara swallowed hard. She'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed a new weight settling on her shoulders. Ward leaned closer. Our orders are to contain it at all costs. We cannot allow it to spread. She glanced at the console. The pulse pattern was repeating again, 3-5-1. I'm not sure containment is possible, Mara said softly. The signal, it's changing. It's adapting. Ward's jaw clenched. Then we have no choice. A sudden ping on the tablet broke the tension. Ward's eyes flicked to the screen. Satellite feed from the Aleutian Trench just picked up a sudden energy spike, he said, voice low. Mara looked up sharply. What kind of spike? Ward shook his head. Too complex to explain here. But it's active. And it's responding. Outside, the wind howled louder. The old station groaned under the storm's pressure. Mara shivered, not from cold but from a growing dread. You said this is a weapon, she said. It can be. But it might also be a message. Or worse, An awakening. Ward reached into his coat and pulled out a small, smooth object. A black sphere about the size of a baseball. This was found in Antarctica 2 weeks ago, he said. We think it's related. Mara's breath hitched. She reached out, fingers trembling. Where is it now? Ward smiled faintly, a predator's smile. Secured. But not for long. We need your expertise. Mara met his gaze, feeling the invisible chains tighten. The echo of the signal was no longer a distant mystery. It was here. And she was caught in its center. Chapter 4. The Man in the Ice. Location, Facility 47C, Antarctica Interior. Date, January 5, 2038. Local time, unknown. There was no name for the kind of silence that lived here. It pressed on the walls, settled on the floor, drifted through the ventilation shafts like a thought half remembered. Facility 47C had gone dark 6 days ago, just after the object was recovered from the deep borehole near Vostok Station. What little remained was being held under quarantine by a joint task force, DNS, Aeon Labs, and something Mara had never heard of, Division Null. The survivor was not expected. He was found 3 kilometers away from the site, barefoot in sub-zero snow, his eyes wide open, unblinking. No memory. No ID. No pulse at first. But he breathed. He moved. He spoke a name no one understood. Elias. That's what they called him now. He sat shirtless in the center of the containment chamber, IVs trailing from both arms, eyes closed like he was listening to music no one else could hear. The lights flickered when he opened them. Dr. Cowrie stood behind the glass wall, arms folded. He shouldn't be alive, she said. Colonel Ward stood beside her. I've heard that before. His EEG reads like a corrupted hard drive. Erratic bursts of delta and gamma waves. No coherence. And then, pure alignment like he's sinking to something. Ward watched the man. Elias. He looked human. Mostly. But something about him was off. Not just the irregularities in his DNA, 98.2% Homo sapiens, 1.3% Neanderthal, and 0.5% unknown, but his presence. As if he wasn't quite there, as if part of him lingered in a room they couldn't see. Cowrie pulled up a live feed of his cranial scans. Strange symbols flickered in his occipital cortex, like glyphs drawn in neural fire. We ran a test, she said. Played the signal near him. Ward turned sharply. And? Cowrie swallowed. He responded. Not consciously. But his body temperature spiked. His pupils dilated in sync with the pulse pattern. And he spoke. What did he say? She pulled up the recording. Ward leaned in as the static-filled audio began. A soft voice, quiet, yet resonant with a strange dual tone, whispered. I remember the fall. Another pause. You were not meant to wake us. Ward's jaw tightened. What do you think it means? Cowrie hesitated. Maybe, he's not just reacting to the signal. Maybe he is the signal. Or what's left of it. A deep hum vibrated through the walls, barely audible but real. Elias opened his eyes. He stared through the glass. Not at Ward. Not at Cowrie. At something behind them. They're coming, he said calmly. They don't like to be alone. Ward's spine stiffened. What do you mean they? But Elias had already closed his eyes again. And in that moment, every monitor in the room blinked once. 351. Chapter 5. The Map Beneath the Skin. New Delhi, India, January 6, 2038. 3:37 Ist. Samir hadn't left his apartment in 30 hours. The lights were off. Curtains drawn. His only illumination came from the pale glow of his monitors and the constellation of sticky notes scattered across his wall like constellations in a sky no one had named yet. He hadn't showered. His last meal was cold biryani from a plastic box. He barely noticed. The signal was evolving again. Not in content, but in behavior. It was beginning to mirror him. When he hesitated, it paused. When he concentrated, it flickered back. He no longer thought of it as a transmission. It was a presence. His fingers hovered over his keyboard as lines of code scrolled endlessly. He'd used an FFT filter to extract high-frequency harmonics from the signal, beyond human hearing, and converted them into spectrographic images. What emerged stunned him. A map. But not of terrain. Not of space. Of structure. Organic maybe. Geological. He wasn't sure. But one shape stood out. Circular, symmetrical, etched with nodes that looked disturbingly like synaptic junctions. At its center was a spiral of what might have been ruins, or roots. Coordinates were embedded in the image. He pulled them up. It wasn't far. South Delhi. Near the edge of the Morali archaeological zone, a forgotten complex of ancient stone buried under centuries of rubble and new construction. The site was cordoned off due to seismic instability, officially. But Samir knew better. He'd seen those shutdown notices before. Language like that meant only one thing. They were hiding something. He printed the image, shoved it into his bag and headed out, heart pounding. The site was quieter than expected. A pair of sleeping guards slumped in a plastic tent near the north entrance, unmoved by the cold. A low fence encircled the ruins, half-submerged pillars and half-erased carvings, all older than anything the textbooks would dare admit. Samir ducked past them and slipped into the dark. The air shifted. Colder, deeper, like a basement that had never seen sunlight. He moved through the collapsed stones, flashlight low. His printout guided him to a narrow opening, a crevice that seemed too symmetrical to be natural. A tunnel of sorts, descending at an angle. And there, etched into the stone wall, was the same spiral from the signal's image. Only, this wasn't carved. It was grown. The material shimmered faintly under his light, like stone pretending not to be metal. Samir pressed his hand to it. For a heartbeat, everything went silent. Not just around him, inside him. And then a whisper, not in his ears but in his memory. "You've always been part of this." He stumbled back, gasping. His flashlight flickered. Behind him, something moved in the dark. He turned. Nothing. Just a breeze. Or maybe breath. The wall where he'd touched was changing, slowly lighting up with a faint geometric glow. Concentric rings, tracing outward from his palm like ripples on a still lake. He took a step back. The spiral blinked once. 3, 4, 1. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. One word in the notification preview. Run. Samir turned and bolted up the tunnel, heart hammering like a war drum. Behind him, deep in the earth, something woke up. Chapter 6, The Listening Stone. Location, Orbital Aeon Black Site, Alaska Interior. Date, January 6, 2038. 22:04 Alaska Standard Time. The room was colder than it should have been. Even inside the underground facility, wrapped in concrete, climate-controlled, shielded from electromagnetic interference, the sphere exuded a kind of stillness that felt unnatural. Not quiet. Absence. Mara Voss stood at the edge of the observation chamber, arms crossed, watching the object suspended in a levitating cradle of magnetic stabilizers. The black sphere hovered 6 inches off its base, motionless. It didn't reflect light. It absorbed it. No heat signature. No readable material. And yet, it hummed. Not out loud. But in Mara's head. Faintly. A resonance that settled behind her eyes whenever she looked directly at it. Like a thought someone else had started inside her mind. Ward stood behind her, silent. "You said it was found in Antarctica," she said finally. "Recovered from a borehole drilled into ancient ice. No prior structures nearby. Just that. Perfectly intact, completely inert, until we brought it here." Mara walked slowly around the containment glass, eyes never leaving the sphere. "Do we know what it's made of?" "No known terrestrial alloy. It reacts to no radiation bands. Not even X-ray scatter. But it does respond to one thing." Ward handed her a small wireless device. She recognized it instantly. A modified playback interface for the signal. He nodded. "Play it." Mara took a breath and tapped the interface. The room didn't change. But the sphere did. At first, only a shimmer. Like oil on water. Then a slow rotation, almost imperceptible. Lights, no runes, appeared along its surface. Faint. Glowing from within. It was decoding the signal. Or answering it. And then she heard the voice. Soft. Not audible in the air, but clear in her skull. "You are not the first to wake us." Mara flinched. The room blurred around her for a second. She staggered back, clutching her temple. Ward stepped forward. "Voss." She didn't answer. She was somewhere else. Seeing something that wasn't here. A field of obsidian monoliths beneath an alien sky. A city built of geometry that shouldn't exist. Eyes that weren't eyes watching from inside the stars. And in the center of it all, the sphere. But larger. Towering. Pulsing with memory. With being. The voice returned. "You remember because you were part of it." She gasped as the vision shattered, the sphere going dim again. The room returned. Lights humming. Heart racing. Ward's voice cut in, low but urgent. "You saw something, didn't you?" She nodded, barely able to speak. It wasn't a hallucination. It was a transfer. Like a memory. But not mine. Ward exchanged a glance with the technician behind the monitoring station. "You're not the first to say that." She looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" He brought up a file on the terminal. A neuroimaging scan. Not hers. Elias. 2 days ago, Ward said. He touched the sphere. Mara froze. The scan showed identical brainwave activity to what she'd just experienced. Identical. Ward's voice lowered. He called it a listening stone. Said it hears the echoes of our species. And when enough of us remember, it answers. She stepped toward the glass again, slowly drawn. The sphere was dark now, but she could still feel it. Waiting. Listening. 3, 4, 1. Chapter 7, The Memory That Wasn't Mine. Location, Facility 47C Quarantine Wing. Date, January 6, 2038. Time, unknown. He dreamed of stone mouths whispering under the ice. Words without sound. Names without language. Faces that weren't human but felt like home. Then the cold returned. It always returned. Elias opened his eyes. The world came back slowly, filtered through glass walls, humming machines, and the sterile burn of artificial light. He flexed his fingers. They responded. But they felt like someone else's. He remembered things that didn't belong to him. A name, Oracle. A structure, the listening stone. And a place, so ancient that the stars themselves had shifted since it fell into shadow. A voice echoed in his head, not his own but familiar. Not all memory belongs to time. He sat up slowly. Across the glass wall, a nurse in white scrubs startled. She tapped on her tablet, probably alerting security that the subject was awake. Subject. He knew what they called him. No ID. No history. No biometric record. Only a shape found in ice. But the truth was far worse. He hadn't been found. He'd been returned. A few minutes later, 2 figures arrived. One he recognized, Dr. Cowrie. The other was new. Tall, lean, predatory. A man who moved like he knew how things ended. Colonel Ward. Elias, Cowrie said gently. Can you speak? He nodded. I can speak. But I don't know which voice to use. Ward frowned. What does that mean? Elias stood. Walked to the glass. Laid a palm against it. And smiled. It means you're asking the wrong species. Ward stiffened. Cowrie glanced at him, then back to Elias. You said something after we played the signal. Something about the fall. What did you mean? Elias looked up. His pupils flickered just for a second, no longer round. Slitted. Reflective. There was a war. Not between nations. Not even between worlds. Between intelligences. Thought against thought. Memory against instinct. And when it ended, we were scattered like ash in wind. Cowrie whispered, You mean, your people? Elias shook his head slowly. No. Ours. Yours and mine. We were one. What? But the body forgot what the mind still knew. Ward stepped forward. Where is the signal coming from? Elias's eyes glinted. It's not coming from anywhere. It's been inside you all along. They stared at him, stunned. Elias lowered his hand. The listening stones don't send signals. They amplify what's already present. You open the door. Now the door is listening. Behind him the lights flickered. Once, twice, 3, 5, 1. And then something new. Another pulse. A fourth. Slower. Heavier. Like a heartbeat awakening after eons of sleep. Elias's voice grew distant, reverent. They're returning. The others. The ones who heard the echo first. They're not ships. They're not machines. They're memories that learn to walk. Ward stepped back. Cowrie whispered almost inaudibly, What have we done? The room began to hum, not from any speaker. From within each of them. A signal no longer just sound. Emotion. Image. History. And Elias, calm amidst the growing pressure, simply smiled. You've remembered just enough to be seen. Chapter 8, Recursive Patterns. Location, Listening Station Theta, 7 Brooks Range, Alaska. Date, January 6, 2038. Time, 21:22 Alaska Standard Time. Mara had been staring at the waveform for 4 hours. The sequence still looped, 351, but something had shifted. A fourth pulse. Then silence. Then, fractal noise. Interference that shouldn't be interference. It had pattern, structure, even syntax. It wasn't just a signal anymore. It was talking back. Ward had left hours ago, called back to Anchorage for a high-clearance briefing. Cowrie was still at Facility 47C with Elias. Mara was alone again, exactly the way she preferred to work. Except now, she found herself glancing at the window every few minutes, expecting to see something in the whiteout storm beyond the glass. A shape. A shadow. A watcher. She tapped a key. The signal played back, sped up to human hearing. And for the first time Mara noticed something chilling. It wasn't just alien. It was familiar. A cadence. A tone. A stuttering pause that mirrored her own speech patterns. Subtle but unmistakable. She ran a correlation scan using her own voice samples from lab notes. The match came back. 87.3% temporal rhythm match. That's impossible, she whispered. Unless the signal had been listening to her. She scrolled back to a recording from 5 nights ago, when she first arrived at Theta 7. She'd spoken aloud during setup. Simple phrases, mostly reflex. Initializing spectrograph scan. Testing recursive loop filter. Let's hear it. And that last one, let's hear it, echoed now in the waveform, distorted but present. Played back in layers. The signal was not just absorbing. It was learning. No, mimicking. Like a mirror held up to thought. Her skin crawled. She stood and stepped away from the console, heart racing. What if the signal wasn't just communication? What if it was a seed? And she had been the soil. The console beeped. A new file had been deposited into the analysis queue. File name, VOS0.dat.arc. Timestamp, 12 years ago. Location tagged, Orbital Aeon Research Vessel Svalin. Mara blinked. That file shouldn't exist. She hadn't worked on the Svalin. She'd never even been briefed on it. She opened it. The first image, herself, seated in a lab aboard the Svalin. Much younger. Hair shorter. Smiling. Laughing with 2 men she didn't recognize. But she remembered the smell of the airlock oil. She remembered the pattern of blinking red lights near the cryo chamber. She remembered a memory she'd never lived. Mara's hands trembled as she scrubbed forward in the footage. And then she saw it, a large artifact on a table. Black, spherical, etched with fractal lines. The same object Ward had shown her 2 days ago. The one found in Antarctica. She had been there. She had touched it. And when she did, the signal began. She stood frozen. There was no denying it now. She wasn't just studying the signal. She had been part of its origin. The artifact hadn't been found. It had been delivered. Through her. And maybe, just maybe, it hadn't come from space at all. But from somewhere inside the human mind. The door is listening, Elias had said. Mara looked at the console. The waveform had changed again. Not sound. Not math. Now it was a face. Her own. And it was smiling. Chapter 9, The Chamber Beneath. Location, Morali Archaeological Site, Delhi, India. Date, January 7, 2038. Time, 3:46 IST. The stone steps descended far deeper than the initial survey had suggested. Cowrie held his flashlight low, illuminating dust-smeared carvings that had no right being there, spirals, nonlinear geometries, and a symbol etched into every threshold. A circle split by a jagged line as if something had torn space itself. He hadn't told Elias yet. He'd found the anomaly by accident, or maybe it had been waiting for him. The scanners at ground level had gone haywire 2 nights ago, registering an impossible magnetic spike beneath the 13th century tomb. Locals whispered of sleeping jinn, but Cowrie had seen enough to suspect something much older and colder. He adjusted his breathing mask. The air down here was stale but not dead. It pulsed. There were no echoes in the tunnel. The sound of his boots vanished instantly, like sound itself was being absorbed. That was when he saw it. A door. No hinges. No seams. Just an obsidian slab taller than a man embedded in the rock. He touched it. The world vanished. He was somewhere else. Not a hallucination. Not a dream. A field of static, endless silver grass, each blade humming at a unique frequency. A sky made of equations, shifting, rewriting themselves in languages he had never learned but now understood. He stood at the center of a spiral made of light and voices. "Welcome back," a voice said. It was his voice. And it wasn't. Cowrie turned. He faced himself, though not entirely. The thing in front of him was an echo, a reflection warped by some deeper truth. The skin shimmered like oil. The eyes held stars. And the smile was identical. "You're the carrier," the echo said. "You brought the code home." Cowrie staggered back. "This isn't real," he whispered. "What is?" the echo replied. "Do you think your world is any less constructed?" The ground beneath him shifted. Images erupted around him. Mara at the listening station, Elias in the frozen ruins, Ward clutching the artifact. All connected. You've already been chosen, Samir? He shook his head violently. No. I'm not part of this. I just analyze data. You just uncovered a door buried in time, the echo said, and opened it with your thoughts. The grass began to burn. The sky fractured. The equations collapsed. Kauri awoke on the chamber floor, gasping. The door was open. Not gone, open. It had folded inward like paper, revealing a cavern bathed in blue light. Walls pulsed with unreadable glyphs. In the center, another black sphere larger than the one Ward had shown Mara. And surrounding it bodies. Human. Ancient. Preserved as if asleep. Each had a circle carved into the forehead. Each hummed with the same frequency as the signal. Kauri backed away slowly, hand trembling as he raised his satellite comm. Mara, he whispered. It's here. It's been here the whole time. Static. Then a voice. But it wasn't hers. You've made contact, it said. The interface is now complete. His blood froze. Who is this? We are you. The part you forgot. The comm went silent. Then the signal resumed, 351, followed by 7. A new pattern. A new phase. Something had awakened. And it had his voice. Chapter 10 Polar Anamnesis. Location: McMurdo Subglacial Observatory, Antarctica. Date: January 6, 2038. Time: 2309 Universal Time Coordinated. Colonel Ward stared at the orb. It no longer looked the same. What had once been a matte black sphere now shimmered faintly with iridescent veins, like the frozen aurora borealis trapped in stone. It pulsed once every 6 seconds. Not light, not sound, something else. Something below human perception, yet unmistakably alive. Elias Juno was crouched at a workstation nearby, cables spread around him like entrails. His fingers flew over a touch console as he adjusted a neural mapping array calibrated to Mara's models. She said the pattern's evolving, Elias muttered. Adding intervals. New primes. Ward didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the orb and on the man sitting next to it. Or rather, what was left of him. Dr. Lee Sang-hoon had volunteered for interface testing 12 hours ago. Now he sat in a chair, silent and smiling. Not catatonic but distant. His pupils were dilated to the edge of black, lips mumbling numbers at irregular intervals. 3, 5, 1, 7, 13, he whispered. 13. 13. 13. Is he looping? Elias asked nervously. No, Ward said quietly. He's counting. Outside, the winds battered the research station, drowning out the groans of shifting ice. The lab, deep beneath the glacial sheet, was supposed to be inert, thermally stable. But the temperature had dropped 3 degrees in the past hour. Elias cursed under his breath. We're losing power in Sector C again. The geothermal stabilizers are, wait. A low hum filled the chamber. It didn't come from the machines. It came from beneath them. Do you hear that? Elias asked. Ward had already drawn his sidearm. Something was moving under the floor. Slow. Rhythmic. Like footsteps from below. The orb pulsed brighter. Lee began to weep, silent tears rolling down his frozen face. They're here, he whispered. They've always been here. Buried in the ice. The lights flickered. And then the floor cracked. A jagged fracture snaked across the carbon-plated tiles, revealing a hollow beneath. A gust of stale air burst upward, sharp as ammonia, ancient and wrong. From the chasm, faint chimes began to echo. Elias backed away. That's not geological. Ward pointed his gun at the fissure. Dr. Juno. Back away from the orb. Lee rose slowly from the chair, his mouth now hanging open. But it wasn't him speaking. It was a voice using his body like a speaker. You call this world yours, the voice said. You measure it, model it, mine it. Lee's hands began to bleed as cracks opened in his skin, symbols forming on his palms. You found pieces of us, shattered echoes, scattered through time. You called them artifacts, relics, warnings. Ward stepped forward. Who are you? Lee tilted his head. We are the first you. You are the echo. Then with horrifying calm, Lee walked toward the fissure and stepped in. There was no scream. Just light. Blue and warm. Like an invitation. Elias dropped to his knees. What the hell is happening? Ward stared into the light, heart pounding. The orb pulsed again. Now it projected something, coordinates. Somewhere in the Pacific. Depth. 10,912 meters. Ward turned toward Elias, voice low and cold. Get the suborbital ready. We're going to the trench. End of ACTs 1. To be continued.